The brass doorknob felt cold beneath my palm as I polished it for the third time that morning. 8 months I'd worked at the Castellano estate, and I'd learnt that perfection wasn't just expected, it was survival. The guest wing was my domain. 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, an endless marble that showed every fingerprint, every speck of dust. I was invisible here. Exactly as I needed to be. Mara. Mrs. Davina's voice cut through the quiet hallway like a blade. My office. Now. I straightened, my heart stumbling over itself. In 8 months, the head housekeeper had never summoned me personally. Instructions came through the staff group chat or morning briefings. Direct contact meant something had gone wrong. I followed her clicking heels down the servants' corridor, my mind racing through possible mistakes. Had I used the wrong polish on the antique furniture? Forgotten to replace towels in the third-floor bathroom? My hands were steady as I carried my cleaning caddy, but my pulse hammered against my throat. Mrs. Davina's office was a small, efficient space that smelled of lavender and disappointment. She didn't sit. Instead, she turned to face me, her expression unreadable behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Castellano has requested you," she said flatly. The cleaning caddy nearly slipped from my grip. "I'm sorry, what?" "Vincent Castellano. The owner of this estate and everything in it?" Her tone suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. "He wants to see you in his private office." Immediately. Cold dread settled in my stomach. In 8 months, I'd seen Vincent Castellano exactly 4 times, always from a distance. Dark hair, expensive suits, eyes that could cut through steel. The staff spoke about him in hushed voices about the men who visited at odd hours. About the way he'd transformed his late father's legitimate real estate business into something else entirely. Something darker. Did he say why? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Mrs. Davina's lips pressed into a thin line. "Mr. Castellano doesn't explain himself to me, and he certainly won't explain himself to you. You have 5 minutes to make yourself presentable. Change into a fresh uniform. Fix your hair." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. "Mara!" She caught my arm as I turned to leave. For a moment, something almost like concern flickered across her face. "Whatever happens in that office, remember your place. Do you understand?" I understood. In Vincent Castellano's world, there were those who mattered and those who served. I was firmly in the second category, and crossing that line had consequences. The staff bathroom mirror showed a young woman with dark eyes too large for her face, black hair escaping its practical bun. I was 24 but looked younger, which had always worked in my favor. People overlooked young, overlooked women. I'd built my life on being overlooked. I changed into my spare uniform, pinned my hair back severely, and checked my reflection one last time. Invisible, unremarkable, safe. The walk to Vincent Castellano's office felt like an execution march. I'd cleaned the main house exactly twice in 8 months, always when the family was away. The corridors here were wider, the artwork original, the silence heavier. My footsteps were swallowed by Persian rugs that probably cost more than my yearly salary. 2 men in dark suits flanked the office door. Security. Their eyes tracked my approach with professional disinterest, but their hands remained close to their jackets. One of them spoke into a small device at his wrist. "The maid is here, sir." A pause. Then a voice through the device, low and controlled. "Send her in." The security guard opened the door, and I stepped into Vincent Castellano's private domain. The office was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate's sprawling grounds. But I barely registered the opulent surroundings because Vincent Castellano himself sat behind a massive mahogany desk, and for the first time in 8 months, he was looking directly at me. He was younger than I'd thought, maybe 32, with the kind of sharp, devastating features that belonged on movie screens, not in real life. His suit was charcoal grey, perfectly tailored, his white shirt open at the collar. Dark eyes assessed me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. "Mara Chun." He said my name like he was testing the weight of it. "Close the door." I obeyed, my hand trembling slightly as I pulled the heavy oak door shut. The click of the lock echoed like a gunshot. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "No, sir." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Not warm, not cold. Something calculating. 8 months you've worked in my house. 8 months. And you've never once tried to get my attention. No lingering looks. No convenient appearances when I'm in a room. No questions about my business. He stood, rounding the desk with predatory grace. "You're either very smart or genuinely uninterested. I'm curious which." He stopped 3 feet away. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive with notes of cedar and smoke. "Both, maybe," I managed, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "I'm here to work, Mr. Castellano. Not to complicate things," he finished. "Good, because I have a proposition for you." Vincent Castellano didn't move closer, but somehow the space between us felt smaller, like the air itself had thinned. "My previous personal assistant has retired," he said, the word retired carrying implications I didn't want to examine. "I need someone who understands discretion, someone who knows how to be invisible when necessary and present when required." My pulse hammered in my ears. "I'm just a housemaid, Mr. Castellano. I don't have experience with— You've been watching." He cut through my protest like it was nothing. 8 months of watching, learning the rhythms of this house, understanding who comes and goes. You think I don't notice? He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was a puzzle he was solving in real time. "You know which meetings run late, which guests stay for dinner. You've seen the security rotations, the delivery schedules, the cars that arrive after midnight." Heat crept up my neck. He was right. I'd noticed everything because noticing kept me safe, kept me out of the way. But I'd never imagined he'd been noticing me. Noticing. "I see everything in my house, Mara." His voice dropped lower, almost intimate. "Including the girl who cleans like her life depends on it and never asks questions she shouldn't. What exactly are you offering?" I asked, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "A position as my personal assistant. You'll manage my private schedule, maintain my quarters, attend to my immediate needs. You'll be present during certain meetings to serve refreshments. Take notes when necessary." He returned to his desk, pulling out a leather folder. "The salary is triple your current rate. Private quarters in the East Wing. Access to the main house. A discretionary budget for appropriate attire. Triple my salary. I could pay off my mother's medical debt in a year instead of 5. Maybe even send money to my younger brother for college. There are conditions," Vincent continued, sliding a document across the desk. "You live on the estate. No exceptions. You don't discuss my business with anyone, not family, not friends, not other staff. What you see, what you hear stays between these walls." His eyes locked onto mine. "And you belong to my household exclusively. No outside employment. No divided loyalties. Belong to his household." The phrasing sent a shiver down my spine. I picked up the document, scanning the dense legal language. It was essentially an NDA on steroids, with clauses about confidentiality that extended years beyond employment termination. There was a severance package that would set me up for life, assuming I lived long enough to collect it. "What happened to your previous assistant?" I asked, the question escaping before I could think better of it. Vincent's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or approval that I'd dared to ask. "She got married, moved to California, sends me a Christmas card every year." He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Despite what you may have heard, Mara, I don't kill my employees for incompetence. That would be extremely poor business practice." The casual way he said it, acknowledging the rumors without quite confirming or denying, made my stomach flip. "I need an answer," Vincent said. "But understand this. If you say yes, there's no going back to the guest wing. No returning to obscurity. You'll be in my inner circle, which means protection, but also exposure. People will notice you. People will try to use you to get to me. And if I say no, then you continue as you are. Guest wing. Current salary. Invisible." He studied me carefully. "But I don't think you want to stay invisible, Mara. Not really. People who want to hide don't clean as well as you do. They don't memorize security patterns. They don't watch everything. He was right, and I hated that he was right. I'd been watching, learning, preparing for something without even knowing what. Maybe this was what I'd been preparing for. I thought of my mother's hospital bills, my brother's acceptance letter to NYU that he couldn't afford, the studio apartment I shared with 2 other girls in Queens. I thought of 8 months of disappearing into wallpaper and wondering if this was all my life would ever be. "I'll do it," I heard myself say. Vincent smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from intimidating to devastatingly handsome. "Good. Sign the document. I'll have Mrs. Davina prepare your new quarters." I signed my name on 3 separate pages, each stroke of the pen feeling like I was signing away more than just employment terms. "One more thing." Vincent stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "When we're in private, you call me Vincent. Sir is for the staff you used to be part of. You're not that anymore. What am I then?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. His dark eyes held mine, and for a moment I saw something hungry and dangerous in them, something that made my breath catch. "Mine," he said simply. "You're mine now, Mara. Welcome to the East Wing." As I turned to leave, still processing everything that had just happened, his voice stopped me at the door. "And, Mara, you'll start tonight. Pack your things. You live here now." Chapter 3. The East Wing, my new quarters, were nothing like the cramped staff dormitory I'd left behind. The bedroom was easily 3 times the size of my Queen's apartment, decorated in soft creams and sage greens. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in linens that probably cost more than my monthly rent. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking the estate's rose gardens, where early autumn had painted the leaves in gold and crimson. It was beautiful. It was luxurious. It was a cage lined in silk. Security cameras tracked every hallway. Guards stood at every exit, their eyes following my movements with professional detachment. The windows in my room didn't open fully, just enough for air, not enough for escape. Not that I was planning to escape, but knowing I couldn't made the room feel smaller, despite its size. The first week blurred together in a disorienting rhythm. I woke at 6 to prepare Vincent's breakfast. Black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast. He took his meals in the morning room when he was alone, his study when he was working. I learned to read his moods by the set of his shoulders. Relaxed meant he'd take the morning room. Tense meant the study and no conversation. I pressed his suits with hands that remembered how to handle expensive fabric from my mother's dry cleaning job years ago. Charcoal on Mondays and Fridays, navy on Tuesdays, black on Wednesdays for evening meetings. He never told me this schedule. I simply observed and adapted. By the 3rd day, I was sitting in on meetings. Vincent would gesture to a chair in the corner of his study, and I'd sink into it with a notepad I rarely used. Men came and went, some in expensive suits, others in leather jackets that didn't quite hide shoulder holsters. They talked about shipments and territories, about Gonko problems at the port, and distribution schedules. They never used explicit language, but the implications were clear in every careful euphemism. "The merchandise from Panama arrives Thursday," a man named Sal said during one meeting, his cold eyes flicking to me briefly before returning to Vincent. "Full inventory as requested." "And the storage issue?" Vincent asked, his voice neutral. "Resolved." The previous tenant understood our need for the space. The way Sal smiled when he said understood made my stomach turn. I learned quickly that Vincent's business operated in shadows, legitimate real estate holdings that concealed less legitimate ventures. Shipping companies that imported more than the manifests declared, restaurants that laundered more than dishes. And I learned that negotiations in his world ended one of 2 ways, with handshakes or with people leaving through the service entrance. Supported by security, their faces carefully blank with pain. On Friday evening, I brought Vincent dinner in his study. He sat hunched over architectural plans, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with lean muscle. He didn't acknowledge me as I set the tray down, but I noticed immediately fresh bruises darkening the knuckles of his right hand. The skin split across two of them. I froze, the sight sending ice through my veins. Vincent looked up, catching me staring. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he flexed his hand slowly, almost deliberately, watching my reaction. "Does it frighten you, Mara?" His voice was quiet, almost curious. What'd I do? I could have lied. Should have lied. But something in his eyes demanded honesty. "Yes," I whispered. He nodded, a ghost of satisfaction crossing his features. "Good." He returned his attention to the plans, dismissing me without another word. "Fear keeps you careful. Don't forget that." I retreated to my room, my hands shaking as I closed the door. This was Vincent Castellano's world, beautiful on the surface, violence underneath, and I'd signed a contract binding me to it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood on my balcony, wrapped in a robe, watching the security lights patrol the grounds below. The autumn air was cold against my skin, carrying the scent of dying roses and something else, cigarette smoke from the guards stationed at the garden entrance. Then I heard it. Men shouting from somewhere deep in the house. The lower levels, maybe the basement I'd never been allowed to access. Angry voices, one pleading, others commanding. My fingers gripped the balcony railing as the shouting escalated, words indistinct but the terror in them unmistakable. Then a gunshot. Sharp, final, echoing through the night. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. I stood frozen, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. The security guards below didn't react, didn't even look up. They'd heard it too, but to them it was just another night at the Castellano estate. Just another sound in Vincent's world, the world I now belonged to. Vincent summoned me to his study 3 days after the gunshot. I'd spent those days moving through my duties like a ghost, jumping at shadows, replaying that sharp crack of sound every time I closed my eyes. But Vincent never mentioned it. Neither did the staff. The basement remained locked, its secrets sealed behind steel doors and silence. "We're attending a dinner party tonight," Vincent said without preamble, gesturing to a garment bag draped across his desk. "At the Marconi estate. You'll accompany me." I stared at the bag. "As Dot's stuff?" His eyes lifted to mine, dark and unreadable. "No, not as staff." He unzipped the bag, revealing a dress that made my breath catch. Black silk, elegant and understated, with a neckline that was modest but the back plunged dangerously low. Beside it, a velvet box containing diamond earrings that caught the afternoon light like captured stars. "I can't wear this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You can. You will." Vincent rounded the desk, standing close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. "Wear your hair down." "The earrings." Nothing else. His gaze traveled over my face, assessing. "You'll be ready by 7. Giovanni will brief you in the car." "Vincent, I don't understand what—" "You're not just my assistant, Mara." His voice dropped lower, intimate and dangerous. "Tonight, you're mine to display. These people need to see that I've made a choice. Do you understand?" I didn't. Not fully. But I nodded anyway, because what else could I do? The Marconi estate made Vincent's home look modest by comparison. Marble columns framed the entrance, and crystal chandeliers dripped light over guests who wore wealth like armor. I felt like an imposter in my borrowed dress, my hand trembling slightly as Vincent guided me inside, his palm warm against the bare skin of my lower back. "Stay close," he murmured against my ear. "Smile when spoken to. Answer questions briefly. If anyone makes you uncomfortable, find me immediately." The dinner party was intimate, perhaps 30 guests, but the air crackled with tension I couldn't name. Men in expensive suits clustered in groups, their conversations stopping as Vincent entered. Women in designer gowns assessed me with eyes that calculated my worth in seconds. Vincent kept me anchored to his side, his hand never leaving my back. He introduced me simply, "Mara, no explanation." No context. Just my name, delivered like a statement that required no elaboration. Vincent. A woman's voice, smooth as honey and twice as dangerous. I heard you were bringing a guest, but I didn't believe it. Isabella Marconi materialized from the crowd like a spectre tall, stunning with auburn hair that cascaded over bare shoulders and a red dress that probably cost more than a car. Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Isabella. Vincent's tone was neutral, but his hand tightened fractionally on my waist. You look well, and you look domesticated. Her green eyes slid to me, assessment turning to thinly veiled hostility. How refreshing. Playing house with the help now, are we? The words hit like a slap. Heat flooded my face, but before I could respond, Vincent's voice cut through the space between us like a blade. Careful, Isabella. His tone was ice, his eyes colder. Jealousy doesn't suit you. Isabella's smile never wavered, but something dangerous flashed in her gaze. Jealous? Of what, exactly? Your little project? She raised her champagne glass in a mock toast. Enjoy the novelty while it lasts, darling. We both know how quickly you tire of new toys. Vincent stepped forward, his body a wall between Isabella and me. This conversation is over. If you'll excuse us. He guided me away, his hand firm, possessive. I could feel eyes following us, curious, speculating, judging. Who is she? I asked quietly once we were alone near the terrace doors. No one who matters. But the tension in his jaw said otherwise. Dinner was an exercise in observation. I sat beside Vincent at a table that groaned under crystal and silver, picking at courses I couldn't name while conversations swirled around me, business discussed in careful code, alliances implied in seating arrangements, territory negotiated over dessert wine. I excused myself after the main course, needing air, needing space. The terrace was blissfully empty, or so I thought. You handled that well with Isabella. The voice came from the shadows near the balustrade. A man stepped into the light, handsome in a conventional way, with sandy hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Luca Rossi. We haven't been formally introduced. Warning bells rang in my head. Mara-chan, I know who you are. He moved closer, too close. Vincent's new. What exactly? Assistant, companion, girlfriend? His smile widened. It's hard to keep track of his euphemisms. I should get back. Tell me, Mara. Luca blocked my path casually, as if by accident. How much do you know about Vincent's business? About the shipments coming through the harbor? About his arrangement with the Colombo family? My blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. No. Lucas's hand reached out, his fingers brushing my bare arm. Come now. A pretty girl like you, in his inner circle, in his home, you must see things, hear things, things that might be valuable to the right people. Step away from her. Vincent's voice cut through the night air, low and lethal. Now. Lucas's hand dropped immediately, but his smile remained. Vincent. We were just getting acquainted with your Luca. Vincent moved with predatory grace, positioning himself between us. Walk away, now. Before I forget, we're guests in your uncle's home. Something in Vincent's tone made Luca's smile falter. He raised his hands in mock surrender and retreated into the party, but not before shooting me one last calculating look. Vincent turned to me, his eyes searching my face. What did he say to you? He asked. About your business? About shipments. My voice shook despite my efforts to control it. I didn't tell him anything. I don't even know anything to tell. I know. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. But he doesn't know that, and that's the problem. In the car ride home, Vincent sat close, his thigh pressed against mine, his silence heavy with thoughts I couldn't read. You handled yourself well tonight, he said finally, his voice quiet in the darkness. But understand this, Mary, are now a target. Stay close to me. Always. The words should have terrified me. Instead, All I could focus on was the heat of his hand as it found mine in the darkness, his fingers lacing through mine like a promise or a claim. The days after the Marconi dinner blurred into a new rhythm, one charged with tension I couldn't name. Vincent watched me. I'd catch him staring when I brought his morning coffee, his eyes tracking the movement of my hands as I set the cup down. During meetings, his gaze would drift from the men speaking to where I sat in the corner, lingering for heartbeats too long before returning to business. And when he handed me documents, his fingers would brush mine deliberately, the contact lasting seconds beyond necessity. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself it meant nothing. I was lying. 2 weeks after the dinner party, I was organizing Vincent's study late into the evening. He'd left hours ago for what Giovanni had carefully termed a business meeting downtown. I should have been in my room, but the study had become my refuge, the only place in the East Wing that felt purposeful rather than ornamental. I was alphabetizing files when I heard the door open. Vincent entered, his movements slower than usual, controlled in a way that suggested effort. His suit jacket was gone, his white shirt partially untucked, and there on his right coiffe spray of crimson that definitely wasn't wine. "You should be in bed," he said, his voice rougher than normal. "So should you." I set down the files, my heart hammering. "Are you hurt?" "No." He crossed to the bar cart, pouring whiskey with steady hands. "Not my blood." The casual admission should have sent me running. Instead, I found myself moving closer, my eyes cataloguing him for injuries. A split at the corner of his lip, redness along his jaw that would bruise by morning. Knuckles scraped raw. "Vincent, I'm fine, Mara." But he wasn't. Something in his eyes looked haunted, buried under layers of control. "Let me see." I reached for his hand before thinking better of it. He didn't pull away, just watched as I examined his knuckles, his blood-stained cuff. The fabric was expensive, probably ruined. Without asking permission, I began unbuttoning it, needing to see if the blood had soaked through to his skin. "What are you doing?" His voice had dropped lower, but he made no move to stop me. Checking for cuts. My fingers worked the buttons, hyper-aware of the heat radiating from his skin, the way his breathing had changed. "You need to clean these properly or they'll get infected." I pushed the cuff back, revealing his forearm. No cuts there, just the blood from whoever he'd dealt with tonight. I moved to the second button of his shirt, then the third. Telling myself I was just being thorough, just checking for injuries. Vincent's hand caught my wrist, stopping me. When I looked up, his dark eyes had gone molten, fixed on my face with an intensity that stole my breath. We stood frozen, his hands circling my wrist, my fingers still resting against the partially unbuttoned shirt, hearts beating too fast in the silence. "Mara." My name was a warning. Or a plea. I couldn't tell which. "I just wanted to make sure you weren't hurt," I whispered. "I am hurt." His free hand came up, cupping my face, his thumb brushing across my lower lip with devastating gentleness. "Just not in any way you can fix." The air between us thickened, charged with everything we hadn't said. His thumb traced my lip again, and I couldn't stop myself from leaning into his touch. His eyes darkened further, and he drew me closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. "This is a mistake," he murmured. But his hand slid to the nape of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair. "I know. You should leave. Go to your room." "I know." But I didn't move. Neither did he. Vincent leaned in, his breath warm against my lips, his eyes asking a question his words wouldn't. I could smell whiskey and cologne and something darker, gunpowder maybe, or blood. I should have been terrified. I wasn't. His phone shattered the moment like a gunshot. Vincent closed his eyes, jaw clenching, before releasing me and stepping back. He pulled the phone from his pocket, his expression hardening as he read the screen. "Problem at the docks," he said, his voice once again controlled, the vulnerability I'd glimpsed locked away. He grabbed his jacket from the chair, already transforming back into the Vincent Castellano the world feared. "Lock your door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but Giovanni." "Vincent," he paused at the door, looking back at me. For a moment, something raw and honest crossed his face. Then it was gone. "Get some sleep, Mara." After he left, I stood in the study for long minutes. My wrist still warm where he'd held it, my lip tingling from his touch. Eventually, I returned to my room, locked the door as instructed, and prepared for a sleepless night. That's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper on my pillow, the handwriting bold and masculine. You're safer when I'm dangerous. V. I held the note against my chest, my heart racing for entirely different reasons than fear. Everything had changed tonight, and there was no going back. I woke to the sound of running footsteps in the hallway. Not the measured pace of security patrols. These were urgent, multiple sets, accompanied by sharp voices speaking in rapid Italian. My phone showed 4:47 a.m. The sky outside was still dark, but lights blazed throughout the estate grounds below. Something was wrong. I pulled on a robe and cracked open my door. The hallway buzzed with controlled chaos, security personnel moving with weapons visible, staff members being ushered back to their quarters. Giovanni appeared at the end of the corridor, his expression grimmer than I'd ever seen it. Miss Chun. He approached quickly. Back in your room, please. Lock the door. What's happening? Lockdown protocol. Mr. Castellano's orders. He was already turning away, speaking into his radio in clipped Italian. I retreated to my room but couldn't lock myself away. Not when I could hear phones ringing incessantly from Vincent's study next door, his voice sharp and commanding through the walls. After 15 minutes of pacing, I gave up pretending I could stay away. Vincent's study door was open, security personnel streaming in and out. I hovered in the doorway until Vincent looked up from a table covered in photographs and documents, his eyes finding mine across the chaos. Everyone out, he said quietly. Now. The room emptied in seconds. Then it was just us, the silence somehow louder than the chaos had been. The Rossi family made a move last night, Vincent said without preamble, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. They hit one of our shipments at the harbor, took out 3 of my men. He gestured to the photographs on the table crime scene, images I wished I hadn't seen, sent a message. My stomach turned. I'm sorry. That's not the problem. Vincent moved around the desk, his eyes never leaving mine. They also sent intelligence to a contact in the FBI. Names, dates, locations. Luca Rossi has been building a case, trying to find leverage. He stopped, 3 feet away. They know about you, Mara. The room tilted slightly. What? Luca talked after the dinner party. Told his uncle that I brought you, that I introduced you as mine. The Rossis think. He stopped, jaw clenching. They think you're my weakness. The weight of those words settled over me like ice. Am I? I whispered. Your weakness. Vincent's eyes blazed. Yes, the admission hung between us, raw and dangerous. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his hands framing my face, forcing me to meet his gaze. You're being moved to a safe house upstate. Giovanni will take you within the hour. You'll stay there until I've handled this situation, Vincent. I can't just... You can. You will. His voice was steel-wrapped in desperation. The Rossis play dirty, Mara. They'll use anyone to get to their enemies. I won't let you become collateral damage in a war you didn't choose. And what about you? My hands came up to grip his wrists. You're staying here, in the middle of it. Something fierce and possessive flashed across his face. This is my world. I was born into this war. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, the gesture achingly gentle despite the violence surrounding us. But you're the one good thing I've let myself want in years. I'm not losing you. Vincent. He silenced me with a kiss. Not gentle, not tentative. Fierce and claiming, his mouth moving over mine with desperate hunger, like he was trying to memorize the taste of me. His hands tangled in my hair, tilting my head back as he deepened the kiss, and I melted into him, my fingers clutching his shirt like an anchor. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine. You're mine, Mara, he said, his voice rough with emotion I'd never heard from him before. That means I protect you. No arguments. No negotiations. For how long? As long as it takes. His eyes opened, meeting mine with absolute certainty. "And when this is over, when you come back, things will be different. I'm done pretending there's anything professional about what you mean to me." A sharp knock interrupted us. Giovanni's voice came through the door. "Sir, the car is ready." Vincent kissed me once more, quick and hard, then stepped back. "Go pack. Essentials only. Giovanni will get you everything else you need." I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. As I turned to leave, Vincent's voice stopped me. "Mara." I looked back. His expression was cold fury wrapped around something fragile. "When I'm done with the Rossis, they'll understand what happens when they threaten what's mine." 30 minutes later, I sat in the back of an armored SUV, Giovanni at the wheel, watching the Castellano estate disappear in the side mirror. Through the tinted windows I caught a glimpse of Vincent on his phone, standing on the front steps, backlit by the rising sun. His voice carried faintly through the closing distance. "Find every Rossi associate in the city. I want locations, patterns, weaknesses. And Sal? Make sure they understand this is personal." The car turned onto the main road and Vincent vanished from view. I touched my lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss, and wondered what war I'd just become the center of. The safe house was a cabin buried deep in the Adirondacks, surrounded by endless forest and silence. For 3 days I existed in a strange limbo. Giovanni had left me with 2 guards who rotated shifts but never spoke to me beyond basic necessities. The cabin was comfortable, rustic luxury with a stone fireplace, a kitchen stocked with groceries, and windows that showed nothing but trees in every direction. I should have felt safe. Instead, I felt trapped. I replayed Vincent's kiss obsessively, the way he'd held my face like I was something precious and breakable, the way he'd said mine like it was both a promise and a warning. I touched my phone 100 times wanting to call him, but Giovanni had been explicit. No contact. Radio silence until Vincent said otherwise. On the 4th day, I woke to the sound of a car engine. My heart leapt into my throat. I moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see a black SUV parked in the gravel drive. The door opened and Vincent emerged, his movements heavy with exhaustion. He wore jeans and a black sweater instead of his usual suits, his hair disheveled, dark stubble shadowing his jaw. He looked human. Vulnerable. I opened the door before he could knock. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then Vincent crossed the threshold and pulled me into his arms, his face buried in my hair, his body solid and warm against mine. "It's handled," he murmured against my temple. "The Rossis won't be a problem anymore." I didn't ask what handled meant. Some details were better left unspoken. That evening, we sat by the fireplace. Glasses of wine, neither of us was really drinking. Vincent had showered and changed, but the exhaustion remained in his eyes, the weight of whatever he'd done to neutralize the threat. "Tell me something true," I said quietly. "Something real about your life." Vincent was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I was 22 when my father died. Heart attack during a meeting. Sudden, no warning. I inherited everything overnight. The business, the territory, the debts, the enemies." He stared into the flames. "Everyone expected me to fail, to be weak. So I became what they feared instead of what they expected. And what did you lose in the process?" His eyes met mine, something raw in them. Everything that makes life worth living. Until recently. My breath caught. "Vincent, you asked me once what you are to me," he interrupted, setting his glass down and turning to face me fully. I didn't have an answer. "Then I do now." He cupped my face in his hands, his thumb tracing my jaw with devastating gentleness. "You're everything I shouldn't want. Everything that makes me vulnerable, that makes me weak. You're the first person in 10 years who's looked at me and seen something other than fear or calculation." "What do I see?" I whispered. "I don't know. But whatever it is, I need it." His forehead rested against mine. "I need you, Mara. More than is smart. More than is safe. Then take me." The words hung between us, an invitation and a surrender. Vincent's eyes darkened, his control visibly fraying. If we do this, there's no going back. You understand that? I stopped being able to go back the moment you looked at me in that study. I reached up, my fingers threading through his hair. I'm already yours, Vincent. Make it real. He kissed me, then not with the desperate urgency of our last kiss, but with deliberate intensity, like he was claiming every part of me. His hands moved over my body with reverent hunger, memorizing curves through fabric before finding skin. The fire crackled, the wine sat forgotten, and the world outside the cabin ceased to exist. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and Vincent's arm heavy across my waist. He was already awake, watching me with eyes that held something I'd never seen before. Contentment, maybe, or peace. "Good morning," I murmured, suddenly shy despite everything that had happened in the darkness. "It is." His hand traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "When we go back to the city, things will be different." My stomach tightened. Different how? "I'm not hiding you anymore, Mara." His voice was firm, decisive. "No more pretending you're just my assistant. No more ambiguity about what you are to me." He pulled me closer, his lips brushing my temple. "You're mine, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." The Castellano estate looked different through the car window sharper somehow, more real. Or maybe I was the one who had changed. Vincent's hand rested possessively on my thigh during the entire drive back, his thumb tracing absent patterns that sent heat coursing through me. We'd spent 2 more days at the cabin, learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with employer and employee. Now, returning to his world, I felt the weight of what we'd become settling over us like armor. "Remember what I said," Vincent murmured, as Giovanni pulled through the estate gates. No more hiding. The staff was assembled in the main foyer when we entered, a formal welcome. I'd never witnessed before. Mrs. Davina stood at the front, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes widened fractionally when Vincent kept his hand at the small of my back, when he didn't release me to return to servants' quarters. "Mrs. Davina," Vincent said, his voice carrying through the marble hall. "Have Miss Chun's belongings moved from the East Wing staff quarters to the suite adjacent to mine. The blue room." Silence crashed through the foyer like a physical force. The blue room. Everyone knew the blue room. It was reserved for family, for the lady of the house. His mother had occupied it before her death. No one had been allowed inside for years. "Sir?" Mrs. Davina's voice faltered. "The blue room requires significant preparation. Perhaps today, Mrs. Davina." Vincent's tone brooked no argument. "I want it ready by this evening." Her eyes flickered to me, something between shock and resentment flashing across her features before she masked it with professionalism. "Of course, sir. Right away." As the staff dispersed, their whispers following us like ghosts, Vincent guided me toward his study. But we didn't make it 3 steps before a sharp voice cut through the hall. "Vincent Castellano." Isabella Marconi stood framed in the doorway, her designer coat still on, her red lips pressed into a furious line. How she'd gotten past security was a mystery, but the rage in her eyes was unmistakable. "Isabella," Vincent's voice went cold. "You weren't announced. Because you've been ignoring my calls for a week." She stalked forward, her heels clicking against marble like gunshots. Her gaze raked over me with unveiled hostility. I heard rumors, but I didn't believe them. Vincent Castellano losing focus over some nobody maid. "Watch yourself." Vincent's voice dropped to something lethal, his body shifting slightly in front of mine. "Very carefully." "Or what?" Isabella laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. "You'll cut me out like you cut out the Rossies." "Everyone's talking about it, Vincent. About how you started a war over her." She gestured at me like I was nothing. "You've compromised yourself, made yourself weak. All for what? A girl who doesn't even understand our world." Vincent's hand found mine, his fingers lacing through mine in a gesture that was both protective and claiming. "I'm going to say this once, Isabella. My personal life is no longer your concern. It hasn't been for years. We're done. We've been done since you chose your father's alliances over you. Isabella's mask cracked, showing the hurt beneath. You pushed me away, Vincent. You pushed everyone away after your father died. And now suddenly, she gets everything I couldn't have. For a moment, something like sympathy crossed Vincent's face. I'm sorry, Isabella. I truly am. But what we had ended a long time ago. You need to accept that and move on. Isabella's eyes glistened, but she held her composure. When she looked at me, her expression was no longer angry. It was pitying. Enjoy it while it lasts, sweetheart. Girls like you don't survive in his world. You're a distraction. A phase. He'll tire of you. And when he does— She paused, letting the implication hang. Well, just remember I warned you. She turned on her heel and left, her exit as dramatic as her entrance. Vincent's hand tightened on mine. She's wrong. Is she? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe. Vincent spun me to face him, his hands framing my face, his eyes intense. You belong exactly where I want you, and I want you here. By my side, in my life, in my bed. His thumb brushed my lower lip. I'm done pretending otherwise. Vincent, I'm hosting a gathering tomorrow night, he said, his tone shifting to something decisive, final. Every major family in New York will be here. Business associates, politicians, judges, everyone who matters in my world. My stomach dropped. Why are you telling me this? His eyes held mine with unwavering intensity. Because you're going to be there, not as my assistant. Not hidden in the shadows. His hands slid to my waist, pulling me closer. It's time they all understand exactly what you are to me. And what am I? I whispered. Mine, he said simply. In every way that matters. And tomorrow night, I'm going to make sure there's no doubt in anyone's mind. The estate had been transformed into something from a dream or a nightmare, depending on perspective. Crystal chandeliers blazed with light. White-gloved servers circulated with champagne that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a month. A string quartet played classical music that drifted through rooms filled with New York's most dangerous men and their immaculately dressed wives. I stood in the blue room, my room now, staring at my reflection and barely recognizing the woman looking back. The gown Vincent had selected was emerald silk, cut to perfection, making my dark hair gleam against the rich fabric. A stylist had arranged my hair in an elegant updo, leaving a few strategic strands loose. Diamond earrings, real ones, caught the light with every movement. I looked like I belonged. I felt like an imposter. You're beautiful. Vincent's voice came from the doorway. He leaned against the frame in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his dark eyes traveling over me with undisguised hunger. Are you ready? No. My voice trembled despite my efforts to control it. Vincent, I don't know if I can do this. All those people, all those families. He crossed to me in 3 strides, his hands settling on my waist, grounding me. You can. You will. His forehead touched mine. I'll be right beside you. Always. What if they don't accept me? A dangerous smile curved his lips. They don't have a choice. The gathering was already in full swing when we descended the grand staircase. Conversations paused as we appeared, heads turning, eyes assessing. I recognized faces from newspapers and television. The Moreau family, the DeLuca brothers, City Councilman Brennan, Judge Ritchie, old money and new power, all gathered under Vincent's roof. And every single one of them was staring at me. Vincent kept me anchored to his side, his hand possessive at my waist as we moved through the crowd. He didn't explain my presence, didn't offer context, just introduced me with a simple, "This is Mara," that somehow said everything and nothing. A silver-haired man in an expensive suit approached, his eyes shrewd. Vincent. Interesting choice for the evening, Marco. Vincent's tone was respectful, but firm. I'm glad you could make it. Marco Moroni, Isabella's father. one of the most powerful men in the city, studied me with the intensity of someone who made his living reading people. Your companion is lovely, though unexpected. The best things usually are, Vincent replied smoothly. Marco's wife, dripping in diamonds, smiled at me, a calculated expression that didn't reach her eyes. Darling, that's a beautiful gown. Valentino? I'm not sure, I admitted. Vincent selected it. Her eyebrows rose fractionally and I realized I'd said something significant. Vincent choosing my clothes, Vincent caring about how I was presented, these were intimate details that revealed far more than words. The evening crawled forward in a blur of introductions and carefully phrased questions. Women assessed my jewelry, my dress, my proximity to Vincent. Men watched with calculation, trying to determine what leverage I represented. And through it all, Vincent remained a constant presence. His hand never leaving my body, his attention never straying far. Then halfway through the evening, Vincent handed his champagne glass to a passing server and clinked a knife against his water glass. The sharp sound cut through conversation like a blade. The room fell silent. My heart hammered against my ribs as Vincent drew me to his side in the center of the grand hall, every eye in the room fixed on us. The weight of their attention was suffocating, but Vincent's hand at my waist kept me grounded. Thank you all for coming tonight, Vincent began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. Many of you have asked about Mara, about her position in my household, about what she represents. Oh God, this was it. The moment everything changed. Vincent's arm tightened around me, drawing me closer, making his claim unmistakable. Let me be clear. His voice was steel-wrapped in silk. Mara-chan is under my personal protection. She is mine in every sense that matters. The room remained frozen, silent. Anyone who threatens her, disrespects her, or attempts to use her against me will answer to me personally. His eyes swept the gathering, meeting the gaze of every powerful man present. This is not a negotiation. This is not a discussion. This is fact. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Marco Moroni raised his glass, a slow smile crossing his weathered face. To Vincent and his lady, he announced. May she bring him the happiness he deserves. One by one, glasses rose throughout the room. An acknowledgement. A show of respect, or at least, an acceptance of Vincent's power to make this declaration and have it honored. Vincent turned to me, his eyes holding mine. And in them I saw everything he hadn't said. Possession and protection, claim and choice. He kissed me then, in front of everyone, sealing his declaration with an intimacy that left no doubt in anyone's mind about what I was to him. When he pulled back, his thumb brushed my cheek. Mine, he murmured, so only I could hear. It's yours, I whispered back. Across the room I caught Isabella's eye. She stood alone near the terrace doors, raising her glass with a bitter smile that held both defeat and warning. The gathering resumed, but everything had shifted. I was no longer the maid who'd cleaned these halls. I was Vincent Castellano's woman. And in his world, that made me both protected and target, untouchable and desperately vulnerable. The gathering finally ended near midnight, the last guests departing with meaningful glances and carefully worded congratulations. I stood on the balcony of the blue room, my room watching taillights disappear down the long drive, my mind replaying Vincent's declaration over and over. She is mine. 3 words that had changed everything. The door opened behind me. I didn't need to turn to know it was Vincent. I'd learned to recognize his presence, the way the air shifted when he entered a room, the controlled energy that preceded him. You disappeared, he said quietly, coming to stand beside me at the railing. I needed air. I hugged myself against the autumn chill. That was ... intense. Necessary. His hand found the small of my back, warm through the silk of my gown. They needed to understand that you're not a secret, not someone they can target without consequences. I turned to face him, studying the man who'd upended my entire existence. In the moonlight, he looked younger, less dangerous. though I knew that was an illusion. Vincent Castellano would always be dangerous. What if I can't do this? The question I'd been afraid to ask finally escaped. What if I'm not strong enough for your world? Vincent's expression shifted, something fierce and protective flashing in his eyes. He pulled me against him, his hands framing my face with devastating gentleness. You've been strong enough since the day I met you, Mara. You just didn't know it yet. His thumb traced my cheekbone. You think I didn't see you? 8 months you worked here, watching, learning, surviving in a world that could have broken you. You were never invisible. You were just waiting. Waiting for what? For someone to see you? His forehead touched mine. I see you, Mara-chan. Every part of you. The girl who scrubbed floors to survive. The woman who looked at me without fear or calculation. The person who makes me want things I swore I'd never let myself have. My breath caught. What things? Peace. The word was raw, honest. Mornings that don't start with threats. Nights that don't end with blood. Someone to come home to who looks at me like I'm more than the empire I inherited. His eyes held mine, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. You make me want to be better than what my father made me. Tears burned behind my eyes. Vincent, I can't offer you normal, Mara. I can't promise safety in any conventional sense. My life will always have danger, always have shadows. His hands tightened on my face. But I can promise you this. You will never be invisible again. Not to me, not to anyone. You will be protected, cherished, seen. And what exactly am I to you? I asked, needing to hear him say it one more time. His answer was immediate, certain, absolute. Everything. The word hung between us, weighted with meaning. Everything. Not his assistant, not his employee, not even just his lover. Everything. I thought about the girl I'd been 8 months ago, invisible, surviving, hoping for nothing more than another paycheck. I thought about who I'd become, the woman standing in designer silk, claimed publicly by the most dangerous man in New York, no longer hiding in shadows but standing in the full light of his world. The transformation should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like finally becoming who I was always meant to be. I'm scared, I admitted, my hands fisting in his tuxedo jacket. Of your world, of what loving you means, of losing myself in all of this. Then be scared, Vincent said, his lips brushing mine. Be scared and choose me anyway. Choose us. Choose this life we could build together, dangerous and imperfect and real. I looked past him at the estate sprawling below, at the city glittering in the distance, at the world that had once seemed so far beyond my reach. Then I looked back at Vincent, the man who'd seen me when I was invisible, who'd claimed me when I had nothing to offer, who'd made me his equal in a world built on power and fear. I already chose, I whispered against his lips. The moment you looked at me in that study, I just didn't realize it yet. Vincent's kiss was his answer, fierce and possessive and achingly tender. When he pulled back, his eyes held a promise I'd never expected to find in my life as a maid in his house. Mine, he murmured. Yours, I confirmed, the word no longer a surrender, but a claiming of my own. We stood together on the balcony, silhouetted against the New York skyline, no longer master and servant, not even just lovers. Something more. Something forged in danger and desire and the rarest commodity in his world. Truth. The girl who'd once scrubbed floors had become the woman who stood beside Vincent Castellano, who'd been seen, claimed, and chosen by the most dangerous man in the city, and who'd chosen him back.